Most people believe the past is fixed. They believe it the way they believe in the solidity of stone, the way they believe in the reliability of mathematics, the way they believe in the things that simply are what they are and cannot be otherwise because they have already happened, and what has already happened is, by definition, beyond the reach of any human hand or any human will. They carry this belief so deeply, so unexamined, so thoroughly woven into the fabric of how they understand reality, that the very suggestion of its opposite sounds not merely unlikely, but slightly absurd. The past is the past. It happened. It is done. You cannot change it. You have been told this your entire life. By people who meant well. By a culture that considers this position not only reasonable, but wise. By the accumulated weight of common sense and conventional understanding, and the quiet, persistent voice of your own memory, which replays the fixed record of what occurred with a fidelity so precise and so relentless that the idea of altering it seems not just impossible, but somehow dishonest. I am here to tell you today, with the full weight of everything I understand about consciousness and the way it operates in this world, that you have been lied to, not maliciously, not by people who wished you harm, but lied to nonetheless. Given a map of reality that is missing its most important territory. Handed a set of tools for living that does not include the one tool that could change everything. The past is not stone. The past is not a fixed record stored in an unchangeable vault. The past is a living, breathing, present tense experience that exists not out there in some objective register of events that have occurred, but in here, in the subconscious mind, as a feeling, as an emotional impression, as a vibrational pattern that is, at this very moment, actively shaping the circumstances of your present life and your future one. And because it exists as a feeling, it can be changed. Not the external facts of what occurred. I am not suggesting that the calendar of events can be rewritten. What I am telling you is something far more important than that. The meaning of what occurred can be changed. The emotional impression it left in the subconscious mind can be changed. The vibrational pattern it has been broadcasting into the field of your life, attracting more of the same quality of experience, can be changed. And when those things change, the present changes with them. This is not metaphor. This is not wishful thinking dressed in spiritual language. This is the precise, practical, extraordinarily powerful teaching that Neville Goddard called revision. And it is, I believe, the most underutilized, the most misunderstood, and the most urgently needed tool in the entire curriculum of conscious living. Before I go any further, I want to tell you about a woman named Eleanor. Eleanor is 63 years old. She lives in the Pacific Northwest, is less than has-hon. To hash is greater than external measure. She is by any external measure a capable, intelligent, warm-hearted woman who has built a good life. She also carried, for 20 years, a wound so specific and so deep that it had become in the private geography of her inner life, the defining fact of who she was. A family tragedy. A rupture so complete, so apparently permanent, so thoroughly confirmed by 2 decades of silence and distance, and the accumulated evidence of a relationship that everyone who knew her had long since accepted as beyond repair, that Eleanor herself had largely stopped believing it could be otherwise. She had tried everything the conventional world offered: therapy, mediation, letters written and not sent, letters written and sent and not answered, the quiet, persistent work of forgiving someone who had not asked for forgiveness and showed no signs of wanting it. Nothing moved. And then Eleanor discovered a technique. A 5-minute practice performed in the specific quality of consciousness that exists just before sleep. A practice so simple that her first response to it was skepticism, and so precise that when she applied it consistently, it produced results that everyone in her life, including Eleanor herself, had declared impossible. In our next block, I am going to tell you Eleanor's story in full. I am going to walk you through exactly what she did, step by step, night by night, and what happened as a result. I am going to give you the complete technique so that you can apply it to whatever wound in your own life has been declared permanent by the people who love you and by the voice in your own mind that has accepted their verdict. But first, I want to say this directly, because it needs to be said before we go any further. If you have a single memory that keeps you awake at night, a moment you would give anything to undo, pay close attention. Because what Eleanor discovered is the only key that can unlock the prison of your past. Now let us build the foundation. Because a technique without understanding is a recipe followed without knowing what cooking is. You might produce something edible by following the steps mechanically, but you will never be able to adapt, to deepen, to truly master what you are doing until you understand why it works. And what Eleanor's technique works upon, what Neville's entire teaching of revision is built upon, is a principle I want to describe to you using an image that I think will make it permanently clear. I call it pruning the garden. Imagine your subconscious mind as a garden. Not a tidy, managed, professionally landscaped garden, but a real one. The kind that has been growing, largely unsupervised, for decades. The kind with magnificent sections and neglected ones. The kind where some extraordinary things have taken root alongside some deeply unwanted ones, and where the unwanted ones, having had more years to establish themselves, have in some cases grown larger and more entrenched than the beautiful ones. In this garden, every significant experience of your life has planted a seed. Every moment of joy, every experience of love, every triumph, every kindness received, and every kindness given, these have planted seeds that grow as patterns of openness, of confidence, of the felt sense that life is fundamentally good and that you are fundamentally worthy of good things. And every experience of pain, every betrayal, every loss, every moment of humiliation or abandonment or failure, every conversation that ended badly and was never repaired, every relationship that broke and stayed broken, these have planted seeds too. seeds that grow as patterns of contraction, of guardedness, of the felt sense that certain good things are not available to you, that certain wounds are permanent, that certain doors, once closed, do not open again. And here is the thing about gardens that the conventional understanding of the past entirely misses. The seeds that were planted 20 years ago are not dormant. They are not historical artifacts, safely contained in the past, where they can be visited occasionally in memory, but where they cannot reach forward into the present. They are alive. They are growing right now. Their roots are active in the soil of your subconscious mind, drawing from it the nutrients that produce your habitual emotional states, your automatic responses to certain people and certain situations, your reflexive beliefs about what is possible for you and what is not. The garden of your subconscious mind is not a museum of the past. It is a living system that is producing your present and your future from the seeds it was given, whether those seeds were planted deliberately or accidentally, whether they were planted by your own choices or by things that were done to you before you were old enough to choose. This is why the past has the power it has over the present, is less than Hasson, 2 hash, is greater than, not because it is fixed, because it is alive. And this is precisely why revision works. Because revision is, in the most precise sense, the act of pruning the garden. When you revise a past event, when you take a specific memory that has been growing as a pattern of pain or limitation or broken relationship, and you deliberately, consciously, imaginatively replace it with a version that implies healing, restoration, a different outcome, you are not pretending the original event did not happen. You are removing the unwanted plant from the soil. You are pulling up the root. And in its place, you are planting a new seed, a seed that will grow as a new pattern, a new emotional impression, a new vibrational signature that the subconscious mind will broadcast into the field of your present life and your future one. And the subconscious mind, which as we have already understood does not distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actual one, receives the revised version with exactly the same creative fidelity with which it received the original. It grows what it is given. Always. Now, I want to be precise about something, because there is a version of this teaching that is sometimes presented in a way that sounds like self-deception, and I want to address that directly, because I know it will arise as an objection in the minds of the thoughtful people listening to this. Revision is not the denial of what happened. It is not the pretense that the painful event did not occur, that the wound was not real, that the loss was not genuine, that the person who hurt you did not actually hurt you. All of those things happened. They were real. The pain they caused was legitimate, and the mark they left was genuine. What revision challenges is not the factual occurrence of the event, but the permanent authority of its emotional impression. It says, that happened, and the feeling it planted in me has been growing in my subconscious garden for 20 years, and I am choosing now, deliberately and consciously, to replace that feeling with one that serves my present life and my future one, rather than one that continues to reproduce the pain of a moment that is decades in the past. That is not dishonesty. That is the most sophisticated, the most courageous, and the most genuinely healing act available to a human consciousness. Neville understood this with absolute clarity. He taught that every evening, before sleep, the student of these principles should review the day and identify any moment that produced a feeling they did not want to carry forward into the subconscious as a seed. Any conversation that ended in tension, any exchange that left a residue of hurt or anger or shame, any experience that, if allowed to plant itself without revision, would grow as more of the same quality of experience in the days ahead. And then, in the drowsy, receptive state of the hypnagogic threshold, the student would replay that moment, not as it happened, but as they wished it had happened. With the understanding, the kindness, the resolution, the healing that the actual event had not produced. And the subconscious mind, receiving this revised version in the most receptive state available to it, would accept it as the truth of what occurred and go to work producing the outer circumstances that matched it. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but always faithfully, always precisely, always with the impersonal reliability of a law that does not have preferences or judgments or conditions. It grows what it is given. Now, Neville also taught something that extends this principle beyond the events of yesterday and last week into the territory that I believe is the most important application of revision for those of us who are carrying wounds that go back not days, but years. Decades in some cases. He taught that the past, as an emotional impression in the subconscious mind, is always accessible to revision. That there is no statute of limitations on the pruning of the garden. That a seed planted 20 years ago can be pulled up tonight in the 5 minutes before sleep and replaced with something that will grow as healing rather than as harm. This is what Eleanor discovered. This is what her 5-minute practice was built upon. And this is what I'm going to show you how to do in the full detail of Eleanor's story and the step-by-step instruction of the technique itself in the time we have remaining together. Because the garden of your subconscious mind is not finished growing. It is growing right now. Today. This evening. In the hours before tonight's sleep. The question is not whether it is growing. The question is what you are going to plant in it tonight. And by the time we are finished, you will know exactly how to answer that question with the precision, the intention, and the genuine feeling that turns a simple 5-minute practice into the most powerful act of healing available to a human being. The lost art of revision. Neville's greatest gift. And as of today, yours. Eleanor was 43 years old when it happened. That is the age at which the event occurred that would become, for the next 20 years of her life, the wound she carried everywhere she went. Into every room, every relationship, every quiet evening when the house was still and the mind turned, as minds do in stillness, toward the thing it cannot resolve. She had a sister. Younger by 4 years, whose name was Ruth. And for the first 4 decades of their lives, they had been the kind of sisters whose closeness other people noticed and remarked upon. Not without friction, no real closeness is without friction, but with the particular bond that forms between two people who have shared the same origin, the same parents, the same childhood home, the same accumulation of family memory that belongs to no one else in the world in quite the same way. They had been each other's witness. The person who remembered what no one else remembered. The person who could be called at any hour and who would answer. The person whose presence at the important moments of life, the births and the losses and the ordinary Tuesdays that turned out to matter enormously, had been so consistently reliable that Eleanor had stopped thinking of it as something that could be otherwise. It was simply the furniture of her life. Ruth was there. Ruth would always be there. And then, in the 43rd year of Eleanor's life, something happened that proved that assumption catastrophically wrong. I am going to be deliberately general about the nature of the conflict because the specific details belong to Eleanor and because I have found, in years of sitting with these teachings and the people who need them most, that the particular shape of a wound matters far less than the depth of it. And the depth of this one was considerable. What I will tell you is that it involved a decision Eleanor made during a family crisis, a decision she believed was right, a decision that Ruth experienced as a profound betrayal. Words were said that could not be unsaid. Positions were taken that calcified over the months that followed into something harder than anger. Into the particular coldness of a person who has decided that a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed and that the only dignified response is permanent distance. Ruth stopped returning Eleanor's calls. Then she stopped answering them. A letter Eleanor wrote, carefully and with great vulnerability, was acknowledged with a single sentence response that closed more doors than it opened. And then the silence settled. Not the silence of a pause in a conversation. The silence of an ending. 20 years of it. Eleanor watched her sister's life from the outside, the way you watch the life of someone you once knew intimately and now know only through the second-hand reports of mutual family members who have learned to navigate carefully around the subject of what happened between them. She watched Ruth's children grow up through photographs she was not in. She attended family events where Ruth was present and where the management of their shared space required the kind of careful choreography that exhausts everyone involved and satisfies no one. She grew older carrying the particular weight of someone who has an unfinished conversation with a person they love and no prospect of finishing it. And she carried the guilt. Not the simple guilt of someone who knows they did wrong and wishes they had done otherwise. The more complex guilt of someone who still believes, after 20 years of examination, that the decision they made was the right one and who cannot reconcile that belief with the devastation it produced. The guilt of consequences you did not intend and cannot undo and cannot stop being responsible for. This was the wound Eleanor carried into her 63rd year. She found Neville Goddard's work the way many people find it, through a combination of genuine need and the particular readiness that arrives when a person has exhausted the conventional options and is willing to consider something they might previously have dismissed. She read about revision with the careful attention of someone who is not looking for comfort, but for something that actually works. And she found, in Neville's precise and unsentimental description of the technique, something that felt less like a spiritual practice and more like a surgical one. A specific intervention on a specific wound. She was skeptical. I want to be clear about that, because I think the skepticism is important to the story and important to anyone listening who shares it. Eleanor was not a credulous person. She did not arrive at this practice starry-eyed and willing to believe anything that offered hope. She arrived at it with the measured, somewhat weary openness of a woman who has tried many things and had her hopes disappointed enough times to be careful about how much hope she invests in anything new. She decided to give it 60 days. 60 nights of the practice, applied consistently and honestly, before she would evaluate the results. Not 60 days of believing it would work. 60 days of doing it regardless of whether she believed it would work. That distinction, I want to note, is one of the most practically important things Eleanor understood about the technique before she began. Neville never asked his students to believe the practice would work before they tried it. He asked them to do it consistently, in the specific quality of consciousness he prescribed, with genuine feeling rather than performed conviction. The belief, he taught, would follow the doing. The conviction would arrive not as a prerequisite but as a result. Eleanor accepted those terms. Now let me tell you exactly what she did. Because this is the part that matters most, and I want to give it to you with the precision it deserves. The first step was identification. Eleanor sat down on the evening before she began the practice, with a notebook and a willingness to be honest, and she identified the specific memory she was going to revise. Not the entire 20 years of estrangement. Not the accumulated weight of 2 decades of silence and family choreography and carried guilt. One specific moment. Neville was very clear on this point, and Eleanor had understood it well. Revision works most powerfully when it is applied to a specific scene, a specific exchange, a specific moment in time that carries within it the emotional seed of everything that followed. For Eleanor, that moment was not difficult to identify. It was the last conversation she and Ruth had before the silence fell. A phone call, lasting perhaps 12 minutes, in which the words that could not be unsaid were said, in which the positions that would calcify into permanent distance were first taken, in which something between them broke with an almost audible quality that Eleanor had never forgotten and that had visited her in the dark of more nights than she could count. That was the scene she was going to revise. The second step was construction. Eleanor needed to know before she went to sleep exactly what the revised version of that scene looked like. Not vaguely. Specifically. With the sensory precision that Neville always insisted upon, because the subconscious mind responds to specificity in a way it cannot respond to generality. She asked herself, if that conversation had gone the way it should have gone, the way she wished with everything in her that it had gone, what would have been different? Not a fantasy of perfection. Not a scene in which all conflict dissolved and all pain evaporated and both of them emerged unchanged by the difficulty. A realistic revision. One that honored the genuine difficulty of the situation and the genuine complexity of both women while producing a different emotional outcome. One that ended not with the breaking of something but with the decision made by both of them together to not let this break them. She constructed the revised scene with care. She knew Ruth's voice. She knew the particular way Ruth expressed herself when she was hurt, the words she reached for, the silences she used. She knew her own voice in that conversation, the defensiveness that had hardened into something that sounded, she could see now, with 20 years of distance, less like conviction and more like fear. In the revised scene, Eleanor heard herself speaking differently, not recanting what she believed, but leading with the love rather than the position, saying, "Before anything else, Ruth, I need you to know that whatever happens with this, you are more important to me than being right about it." And in the revised scene, she heard Ruth pause. The particular quality of pause that belongs to a person who has been braced for a fight and has just been given something unexpected instead. She did not construct a full reconciliation in the revised scene. She constructed a different ending to that one conversation. An ending in which the door was not closed but left open. In which both of them hung up the phone feeling hurt, yes, because the situation was genuinely painful, but not severed. Not finished. Still in the conversation. That was the revised scene. The third step was the gateway. This is where the technique moves from preparation into practice, and where Neville's insistence on the specific quality of consciousness becomes not just important, but essential. Eleanor did not attempt the revision while she was fully awake. She did not sit at her desk in the middle of the afternoon and run the revised scene through her mind like a film she was editing. She waited for the threshold. Each night, she would lie down at her usual hour and allow the natural process of drowsiness to begin. She would let the day release its grip gradually, letting the thoughts of the day grow less sharp, less insistent, less tethered to the precise logic of the waking mind. And as she felt the first genuine loosening, the first quality of softness in the mind that signals the approach of sleep, she would bring the revised scene forward. Not the original scene. Never the original scene. Neville was specific about this, and Eleanor had taken it seriously. The purpose of the practice is not to rehearse the wound, but to replace it. And the mind that is rehearsing the wound, even in the context of preparing to revise it, is planting seeds of more of the same. The revised scene only. The version in which the door was left open. The version in which Eleanor led with love. The version in which Ruth paused with that particular quality of surprise that belongs to someone who expected a fight and received tenderness instead. And the fourth step, the one that Eleanor would later describe as the most difficult and the most important, was feeling. not watching the revised scene like a film. Being in it. Feeling the relief of having said the right thing. The specific, physical, located sensation of a chest that is open rather than braced. Of a breath that goes deep because the body is not preparing for impact. Of the particular quality of warmth that belongs to a conversation that is difficult but not destructive. Feeling the sound of Ruth's voice with the quality of pause in it rather than the quality of finality. Feeling, above all, the sense of the door still being open. The specific emotional texture of a relationship that has been strained but not severed. The feeling of still being Ruth's sister in a way that matters, in a way that has a future, in a way that has not been permanently foreclosed by 12 minutes on a telephone 20 years ago. She held that feeling as she drifted into sleep. Not always perfectly. Not always with the full vividness she reached for. Some nights, the feeling was complete and real, and she carried it into sleep with a sense of something genuinely planted. Other nights, it was thin, and the doubt was loud, and the critical mind offered its familiar inventory of reasons why this was not going to change anything, and she was a 63-year-old woman lying in the dark, pretending a 20-year-old phone call went differently. On those nights, Eleanor did what Margaret had done with her seed, what every sincere practitioner of these teachings learns to do when the practice is thin. She found the smallest, genuine feeling available to her, and she planted that. The faintest warmth of the door still being open. The most tentative suggestion of a chest that is not braced. The quietest possible echo of her own voice saying, "You are more important to me than being right." Small, but real, but felt. And she trusted the soil to do what soil does with even the smallest genuine seed. She practiced every night for 41 days. On the 42nd day, she received an email from Ruth. It was not a long email. It was not a declaration of reconciliation or an apology or a sweeping gesture of repair. It was a photograph. A photograph of the house where they had grown up, which Ruth had apparently driven past recently, and which had just been repainted in a color that was, Ruth noted in the 3 lines of text beneath the image, absolutely wrong for that house, and would have made their mother furious. That was the entire email. A photograph and 3 lines about a paint color. Eleanor sat with her phone for a long time. And then she laughed. The same quality of laugh that Margaret had laughed when she read Claire's 7 words. Not the laugh of someone who has received everything they wanted. The laugh of someone who has just stepped onto the bridge and recognized it for what it is. She replied, warmly and simply, and without the weight of 41 days of practice pressing on every word, without the desperation of someone who fears this is their only chance. She replied as the woman who had, night after night, in the 5 minutes before sleep, practiced being the person who had left the door open. The correspondence that followed was slow, careful. The way correspondence between people who have a long history and a significant wound tends to be. 2 steps forward and one step of awkward silence. Moments of warmth followed by moments of careful navigation. But it was correspondence. After 4 months of emails and 2 phone calls that lasted longer than either of them had planned, Ruth said something that stopped Eleanor completely. She said, "I have been thinking about that phone call for a long time. And I think I heard you wrong." Eleanor did not tell Ruth about the practice. Not then. Perhaps not ever, and that is entirely appropriate, because the practice is not the point of the story for the person whose life it changed. The point of the story is what Ruth said next. She said, "I think you were trying to lead with the love, and I was too angry to hear it that way." The door that had been closed for 20 years, the door that everyone who knew Eleanor had accepted as permanently closed, had opened. Not because the past had been erased, because the emotional impression of the past had been revised. Because Eleanor had pruned the garden night after night in 5 minutes before sleep, replacing the seed of a broken conversation with the seed of one that had been handled with love. And the subconscious mind, having received the revised seed with genuine feeling in the most receptive state available to it, had gone to work. Not in Eleanor's life only. In Ruth's. Because this is something that students of these teachings sometimes find surprising and that Neville taught with great consistency. When you revise a past event that involves another person, you are not only changing the emotional impression in your own subconscious mind, you are working in the one consciousness that underlies all apparently separate minds. The revision plants its seed not only in you, but in the field of the relationship itself. In the shared consciousness that you and the other person both inhabit as apparently separate expressions of the one mind that Neville called God, or infinite mind, or simply the deeper self that is not divided by the apparent separateness of individual bodies and individual histories. Ruth did not know Eleanor was practicing revision. Ruth did not know what Neville Goddard had taught about the subconscious mind, or the sleep gateway, or the feeling as the seed. But Ruth's mind, as a region of the one consciousness in which Eleanor was doing her inner work, responded. The way it always responds. The way it always has. The way it always will. With the faithful, impersonal, utterly reliable reflection of the inner work that was done. Now, I want to give you the technique in its complete, step-by-step form. Not as a summary of what Eleanor did, as an instruction you can carry into tonight's practice. Step 1. Identify the scene. Choose one specific memory, one specific moment or conversation or event that carries the emotional seed of a wound you want to heal. Not the entire history of the wound. The moment where it began, or the moment that most concentrates its feeling. Step 2. Construct the revision. While you are fully awake, before you attempt the practice, build the revised version of the scene in your imagination. Make it specific. Make it realistic. Not a fantasy of perfection, but a genuine alternative, one that honors the complexity of the situation while producing a different emotional outcome. Know exactly what is different in the revised version before you take it into the threshold. Step 3. Wait for the gateway. Do not attempt the revision while fully awake. Wait for the hypnagogic threshold, the drowsy softening of the waking mind that signals the approach of sleep. This is when the guard is down and the soil is most receptive, and the seed can pass directly into the subconscious without the interference of the critical mind. Step 4. Enter the scene as a participant, not an observer. Do not watch the revised version from the outside. Be in it. Hear the voices. Feel the room. Experience the physical sensations that belong to the revised emotional reality. Step 5. Find the feeling. The specific, located, physically real feeling that belongs to the revised outcome. The tone of reality for this particular healing. Whatever that feeling is for you and for this wound, find it and let it be as present as it genuinely wants to be. And step 6. Carry it into sleep. Let the feeling be the last conscious experience of the day. Let it be what the subconscious mind receives as its final instruction before the hours of sleep, during which it will go to work growing what it has been given. Do this every night, consistently, without demanding visible results on any particular schedule. With the patience of a gardener who has planted a real seed in real soil and who understands that the process of growth cannot be rushed, only trusted. And trust the soil. It has never failed to grow what was genuinely planted in it. Not once. In the entire history of consciousness operating in this world. Not once. I want to address something before we go into the final practice. Because I know that somewhere in the course of what we have explored together today, a voice has arisen in some of you. A careful, reasonable, experience-hardened voice that has been listening to Eleanor's story and to the mechanics of revision and to the promise that a 5-minute practice before sleep can heal a 20-year wound. And that voice has been saying, quietly but persistently, something like this. This is a beautiful idea, but I am not sure I believe it. And I want to say to that voice, directly and without condescension, that it is not only understandable, but appropriate. You should not believe something simply because it has been presented to you with authority and warmth and the compelling story of a woman named Eleanor. You should not surrender your discernment because the idea is appealing or because you want it to be true. Healthy skepticism is not the enemy of these teachings. Closed-minded dismissal is. And there is an enormous difference between the two. The skeptic says, I am not yet convinced, but I am willing to test this against my own experience and let the results speak for themselves. The closed mind says, this cannot be true because it does not fit the model of reality I have already accepted, and therefore I will not engage with it seriously enough to discover whether the model needs updating. Eleanor was a skeptic. She gave the practice 60 days before she evaluated the results, is less than Hasson, Tuhash, is greater than a lover. She did not demand belief of herself before she began. She demanded only consistency and honesty and genuine feeling. I am asking the same of you. Not belief, willingness. The willingness to take the technique into tonight's practice with the same quality of honest, unpretentious, genuinely felt engagement that Eleanor brought to her 41 nights. And then to notice what happens. Not in the outer world necessarily, not right away. The outer world is always the last thing to change, because it is always the furthest downstream from the inner work. But in the body, in the quality of the sleep that follows a genuine practice, in the particular feeling of a morning that follows a night in which the last conscious seed planted was one of healing rather than rehearsed pain. Notice those things. They are real. They are measurable in the only laboratory that ultimately matters: your own direct experience. Now I want to address a second form of skepticism that is subtler and, I think, more common among the thoughtful people who are most likely to be listening to this. It is the skepticism not about whether the technique works, but about whether it is right to use it. This takes several forms. Some people feel that revising the past is a form of dishonesty, that it is the spiritual equivalent of rewriting history, of pretending that things happened differently than they did, of disrespecting the reality of what occurred by replacing it with a more comfortable fiction. I addressed this in our first block, but I want to go deeper into it now because I think the objection deserves more than a passing response. The events of your past are not stored in some objective external archive where they exist independently of your experience of them. They are stored in you as feelings, as emotional impressions in the subconscious mind, as the living, growing, present tense patterns that are producing your current experience of reality. The factual record of what occurred, the sequence of events, the words that were said, the choices that were made, none of that is altered by revision. The calendar of the past remains exactly as it was. What changes is the emotional authority you grant to that record over your present life. And I want to ask you, with genuine seriousness, what moral principle requires you to continue allowing a painful emotional impression from 20 years ago to govern the quality of your present relationships, your present health, your present capacity for joy and connection, and the full inhabiting of the life you have remaining? What is served by that faithfulness to the original wound? Not the truth. The truth is not honored by your suffering. The truth is not better preserved by a woman lying awake at night for 20 years, rehearsing a 12-minute phone call that broke something she loved. The only thing served by refusing to revise the emotional impression of the past is the habit of the wound, the familiarity of it, the particular, deeply human tendency to organize an identity around a pain that has been carried long enough to feel like a defining characteristic rather than a circumstance that can be changed. Revision does not ask you to lie about the past. It asks you to stop letting the past lie about your future. There is also a form of this objection that comes not from ethical concern, but from grief. Some of you are carrying wounds that involve people who are no longer living. A parent whose approval was never given. A child whose life ended too soon. A person who died with things unsaid between you that can never now be said in the ordinary way. And the idea of revising those memories can feel, I understand this, like a betrayal of the grief itself. Like a denial of the reality and the importance of what was lost. I want to speak to this with great care. Revision, applied to the memories of those who have passed, is not the denial of the loss. It is the healing of the living relationship with the memory of the person. The conversation you needed to have with your father and never had can be had now, in the imaginal space where Neville taught that all genuine contact between consciousnesses ultimately occurs anyway. The words of approval you needed to hear and never heard can be heard now, in the revised scene that you carry into sleep, where the subconscious mind will receive them with exactly the same healing fidelity as if they had been spoken in the physical world. The grief does not require the wound to remain unhealed in order to be honored. You can love someone completely and mourn their absence fully, and still choose to revise the emotional impression of the moments between you that were painful. The love and the healing are not in opposition. They are the same act. And to the person who is carrying the specific weight of a wound involving someone who has died, I want to say this. Neville taught that the imaginal act is the real act. That what occurs in the imagination, when it occurs with genuine feeling in the receptive state of the threshold, is not a simulation of reality, but a form of it. That the consciousness of the person you are revising a memory with is not absent simply because their physical form is gone. Whether you accept that teaching in its fullest metaphysical implication or hold it more lightly as a useful frame, the practical result is the same. The emotional impression in your subconscious mind changes. The wound heals. The pattern that has been growing from that original seed begins to be replaced by a new one. And your present life, downstream from that inner change, begins to reflect it. Now, I want to bring everything we have explored today into the final practice. This is the guided revision exercise that I want you to use not only tonight, but on as many nights as the wound you are working with requires. Which may be many nights. Or it may be fewer than you expect. The garden knows how deep the root goes better than the conscious mind does, and it will tell you through the quality of the feeling when the seed has taken hold. Find your comfortable position now. Let the body settle into whatever surface holds it. Let the hands open. Let the shoulders release the particular held quality that the day tends to leave in them. Let the breath find its own natural rhythm without being managed. Close your eyes. And take one breath that is deeper and slower than the last. As you release it, let the surface of today go with it. The tasks and the transactions and the small frictions of ordinary hours. Let the surface of today simply rest outside the door of this particular quality of stillness. And beneath it, find the quiet. The stillness that is always present beneath the noise. The particular quality of inner silence that does not need to be created because it is always already there, waiting beneath the activity of the waking mind, like the still water beneath the surface of a river that is moving fast. Rest in that stillness for a moment. Now I want you to bring to mind the memory you have chosen to revise. Not to replay it. Not to rehearse it. Simply to identify it, the way you would identify a plant in the garden that you have decided to remove. With clarity and without drama. You know this memory. You have known it for a long time. It has visited you in the dark of more nights than you care to count. It has shaped in ways you may only now be beginning to fully understand the patterns of your present life. Acknowledge it. Not with blame and not with the rehearsal of its pain. Simply with the clear-eyed recognition of someone who is about to do something about it. And now, set the original memory aside. Let it rest where it is for now. You are not going there tonight. You are going somewhere else. Bring forward the revised version. The one you have constructed while awake, with the care and the specificity that the work deserves. The version in which the conversation ended differently. The version in which the right thing was said or heard or offered. The version in which the door was left open rather than closed. The version in which the wound did not occur or occurring was met with the understanding or the love or the honest communication that would have changed everything that followed. Step into it now. Not as a viewer watching a scene, as a participant living it. Feel the room or the space where it occurs. The temperature of it. The quality of light. The presence of the other person, known to you so specifically and so well in the revised version of this moment. Hear the words that should have been spoken. Your own words carrying the love or the clarity or the courage that the original moment did not produce. Let them be spoken now in the imaginal space where Neville taught that the real work of consciousness always occurs. Hear the response. Whatever the response is in your revised version, the pause, the softening, the unexpected recognition, the door choosing to remain open, is less than #. 2# is greater than. Hear it with the same physical reality with which you would hear a voice in the room beside you. And now find the feeling. The specific, located, physically real feeling that belongs to this revised outcome. For some of you, it will be relief. The particular physical sensation of a chest that has been braced for years and is finally, in this moment, allowed to open. For some of you, it will be warmth. The warmth of a relationship that is strained but not severed, difficult but not finished, wounded but not dead. For some of you, it will be the specific sensation of being seen, of being understood by the person whose understanding you most needed and did not receive, of hearing, in whatever form your revision takes, the words that your soul has been waiting for. For some of you, it will be something quieter than any of these. A simple easing. A breath that goes fractionally deeper. a loosening of something held so long it had stopped feeling like tension and started feeling like the natural shape of the body. Whatever the feeling is, find it. Let it be as present as it genuinely wants to be, without forcing and without performing. And if it is small tonight, if the feeling is tentative and the doubt is loud, and the critical mind is offering its familiar inventory of reasons why this is not going to change a thing that happened 20 years ago, find the smallest genuine feeling available. The faintest warmth. The most tentative easing. The quietest suggestion of a door that is open rather than closed. Plant that. Because the soil does not require a perfect seed. It requires a real one. And real means felt, however slightly, however imperfectly, from the inside of the revised reality rather than from the outside of the original one. Let the feeling be the dominant experience of this moment. Let it be what you carry into sleep tonight. Not the original memory. Not the wound. Not the 12-minute phone call or whatever specific moment your own revision is working with. The revised version. The feeling of the door open. The feeling of the right thing said. The feeling of a relationship that has a future. The feeling of a wound in the process of becoming a scar, which is what a wound becomes when the body has been allowed to heal it properly. Carry that feeling into sleep. And trust the garden. Because the garden is already at work. Even now, in this quality of stillness, the subconscious mind is receiving what you are giving it and beginning the invisible, patient, utterly reliable work of growing it into the circumstances of your waking life. It does not know how long the wound has been there. It does not calculate whether 20 years is too long for healing to be possible. It does not consult the opinions of the people who have watched the estrangement and decided it is permanent. It simply receives the seed and grows it, as it has always done, as it is doing right now, as it will continue to do night after night, for every night that you bring this practice, the honest, consistent, genuinely felt engagement it deserves. Before I release you into the rest of your evening, I want to say one more thing. And I want to say it not as a teacher addressing students, but as one human being speaking to another across the particular kind of distance that a recording creates, and that genuine feeling can always bridge. You are not too old for this. I say this because I know the thought arises, particularly for those of you who are in the later chapters of life, who have been carrying certain wounds for so long that the healing of them can feel less like a realistic possibility and more like a beautiful idea that belongs to people with more time ahead of them than behind. I want to challenge that thought with everything I understand about how consciousness operates. The subconscious mind has no age. It does not look at the years remaining and decide whether healing is worth the investment. It does not weigh the decades of the wound against the probable duration of the benefit and conclude that the math does not justify the effort. It receives the seed. and grows it. With exactly the same fidelity and exactly the same speed for the person who is 78 as for the person who is 32. And even if the healing produced only a single year of mornings that do not begin with the weight of the wound, only a single year of nights that end with the feeling of a door open rather than the rehearsal of a door closed, would that year not be worth 5 minutes of practice before sleep? Eleanor thought so. And Eleanor, who carried her wound for 20 years and healed it in 41 nights, is spending her present days in correspondence with her sister that has grown slowly and imperfectly and beautifully into something that deserves the word reconciliation. She did not get those 20 years back. The calendar of the past is unchanged. But she got the years ahead. And that is the promise of this practice, not the erasure of what was, but the liberation of what can still be. The garden is waiting. The soil is ready. And tonight, in the 5 minutes before sleep, you have everything you need to begin the pruning. Go well, my friend. Go gently. And go tonight into sleep carrying the feeling of the wound becoming the healing, the door becoming open, the past becoming, at last, what it always had the power to be. Not a prison. A garden. And you, the gardener, with the seed in your hand and the soil before you, and all the time you need to grow something worth having from everything you have already lived. Plant it tonight.